Every morning, before the world asks anything of you, there is a brief and sacred window of time where your life belongs entirely to you. No demands, no expectations, no noise, just choice. And in that space, often ignored, often rushed, lies the difference between a life lived by intention and a life lived by reaction. Most people wake up and immediately surrender control. They reach for their phone, their worries, their past mistakes, their unfinished business. Before their feet touch the ground, their mind is already behind. But disciplined people, focused people, people who build meaningful lives understand something deeper. The morning is not about time management, it is about mind management. A morning routine is not a checklist, it is a declaration. It says, I decide who I am today before the world decides for me. When you wake up with structure, you are telling your subconscious that your life has order, that your goals matter, that your future is worth preparing for. Psychology tells us the brain is most malleable in the early hours. Philosophy tells us that habits shape character. Life proves both to be true. See, success doesn't show up one day wearing a tuxedo. It arrives quietly, dressed in repetition. It is built in moments no one applauds, reading when others are sleeping, thinking when others are scrolling, training your body, sharpening your mind, feeding your spirit before the chaos begins. That is not luck, that is self-respect. A strong morning routine teaches patience, discipline, and self-trust. It trains you to do what is necessary, not what is convenient. And once you master that in the morning, you begin to master it everywhere else. You stop waiting for motivation and start relying on commitment. You stop negotiating with weakness and start aligning with purpose. Remember this: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. And your first habit of the day sets the tone for every decision that follows. Win the morning and you give yourself a fighting chance to win the day. Do that consistently and you won't just change your schedule, you'll change your life. So tomorrow morning, don't just wake up, arrive. Arrive with intention. Arrive with discipline. Arrive ready to become the person your future is counting on. Mornings are not just the beginning of a day, they are the birthplace of identity and the silent architect of destiny. Long before success becomes visible, before results take shape, before confidence is recognized by the world, it is formed in those early hours when no one is watching. The way you rise in the morning reflects the way you rise in life. When you wake up with intention, you are not merely starting a day, you are reinforcing who you believe you are and who you are becoming. Psychologically, the mind in the morning is impressionable. It is uncluttered, less defensive, and more open to direction. Whatever you feed it first becomes the lens through which the rest of the day is interpreted. If the first thing you consume is chaos, urgency, and distraction, your mind adopts a reactive posture. But if the first thing you give yourself is structure, reflection, and focus, your brain learns order. Over time, that order becomes identity. You don't just do disciplined things, you become a disciplined person. Philosophically, destiny is not a dramatic moment, it is a quiet accumulation of choices. Most people look for transformation and breakthroughs, but real change happens in patterns. The morning is where patterns are either reinforced or rewritten. When you consistently honor that space, you are casting daily votes for the person you want to be. One morning doesn't define you, but thousands of mornings do. That is how destiny is shaped, slowly, invisibly, relentlessly. Education teaches us that learning compounds. Psychology teaches us that habits compound. Life teaches us that identity compounds. The morning is where all three intersect. When you wake up with purpose, you send a message to your subconscious that your life is not accidental. That message, repeated daily, becomes belief. Belief becomes behavior. Behavior becomes destiny. People often underestimate the power of beginnings. But every great structure depends on its foundation. If the foundation is rushed, cracked, or neglected, everything built on it is unstable. Your morning is that foundation. Guard it, shape it, respect it. Because the future you dream about is quietly waiting for the version of you that shows up when the sun rises. Discipline in small daily actions is often misunderstood. People see discipline as restriction, as punishment, as the loss of freedom. But in truth, discipline is the highest form of freedom. It is the ability to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort, clarity over chaos, direction over drift. The smallest actions you repeat every day are not insignificant. They are the training ground of the mind and the rehearsal space of character. Psychologically, the brain craves consistency. When you commit to small, repeatable actions, waking up at the same time, moving your body, reading a few pages, sitting in silence, you reduce decision fatigue. You conserve mental energy. Instead of negotiating with yourself every morning, you move with certainty. That certainty builds confidence, and confidence creates momentum. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. That is not weakness, that is mastery. From an intellectual standpoint, freedom is not the absence of structure, but the presence of self-imposed order, a life without discipline is not free, it is reactive, driven by impulse, emotion, and external pressure. But a disciplined life creates space to think, space to choose, space to grow. When you discipline your mornings with simple, intentional actions, you are not limiting yourself. You are removing the noise that limits you. Small actions compound in ways the mind struggles to immediately perceive. One early wake-up does not change a life. One focused morning does not create success. But consistency changes everything. Just as a single drop of water seems harmless, repeated drops carve stone. Your daily habits carve your character. They shape how you respond to adversity, how you handle pressure, how you see yourself when no one is watching. Education teaches us that mastery comes from practice, not inspiration. Psychology teaches us that identity follows behavior. When you repeatedly keep small promises to yourself, you build trust with yourself. That self-trust becomes resilience. It becomes the quiet confidence that says, I can rely on me. And when life tests you, and it will, that inner reliability becomes your anchor. In the end, freedom is not waking up whenever you want or doing whatever you feel like. Freedom is waking up knowing you are in control of your actions, your direction, and your future. And that freedom is earned, one small disciplined morning at a time. Before the world speaks to you, before it places its demands, its expectations, and its noise on your shoulders, your mind is already learning how to respond. The question is not whether you are being trained each morning, but who is doing the training. If the world gets to you first, it conditions you to react. If you get to yourself first, you learn to lead your own thoughts. A morning routine is not about productivity alone, it is psychological preparation. From a psychological perspective, the human mind is most vulnerable to influence in its early waking hours. This is when habits either reinforce control or surrender it. When the first input of the day is news, messages, or social comparison, the brain shifts into defense mode. Stress hormones rise, attention fragments, and your internal narrative becomes externally driven. You start the day answering questions that were never yours to answer. But when you intentionally design your morning through silence, reflection, movement, or study, you anchor your attention inward. You tell your nervous system that you are safe, capable, and in command. Philosophically, control of the mind is the highest form of sovereignty. History shows that those who master their inner world are less easily ruled by the outer one. A disciplined morning routine is an act of quiet resistance against chaos. It says, I will not allow circumstance to dictate my state. This is not arrogance, it is responsibility. You are not avoiding the world, you are preparing to meet it with clarity. Education reinforces truth. The best thinkers, leaders, and creators understood the value of solitude before engagement. They knew that thought must be sharpened before it is tested. When you train your mind in the morning by reading, journaling, praying, or simply thinking, you are sharpening the lens through which the rest of the day is perceived. Problems become challenges. Pressure becomes information. Setbacks become instruction. Over time, this mental training changes how you live. You respond instead of react. You listen instead of panic. You choose instead of drift. The morning becomes a rehearsal for life, where you practice calm before chaos, intention before impulse. And when the world inevitably tries to pull you in 100 directions, you remain centered. Not because life is easy, but because your mind has been trained to stand its ground. People often admire success from a distance, mistaking it for talent, luck, or perfect timing. But when you examine it closely, success is rarely spontaneous. It is prepared. It is built long before the moment of recognition arrives. Talent may open a door, but preparation determines whether you are ready to walk through it. And preparation is not dramatic, it is routine. Psychologically, the mind performs best when it has been conditioned through repetition. Confidence is not something you discover on the day of the challenge. It is something you earn through consistent preparation. When you rehearse discipline every morning, you reduce fear because fear thrives in uncertainty. Preparation replaces uncertainty with familiarity. You have already met yourself in effort, in focus, in discomfort. So when opportunity shows up, you are not surprised by the work it demands. From an educational perspective, mastery is built through deliberate practice. No field of excellence, science, art, leadership, or sport rewards raw ability alone. It rewards those who show up prepared day after day, even when progress feels invisible. The morning routine becomes the classroom where this preparation happens. It is where skills are sharpened, ideas are refined, and standards are set. You don't wait for a big moment to prove yourself. You prepare so thoroughly that the big moment becomes just another day. Philosophically, preparation is an act of respect for your goals, for your potential, and for the responsibilities you carry. When you prepare, you acknowledge that success is not owed to you, it is earned. You accept that excellence demands consistency, not convenience. This mindset removes entitlement and replaces it with humility and effort. Those who rely on talent alone often panic when challenged. Those who rely on preparation remain composed. They understand that pressure does not create character, it reveals it. And character is built in private, in the unseen hours of preparation. The morning is where that character is forged. In the end, success does not come to those who wait to feel ready. It comes to those who prepare until readiness is inevitable. When opportunity finally arrives, and it always does, you won't need to rise to the occasion. You will simply perform at the level you have already practiced every morning. How you begin each day may seem quiet, ordinary, even insignificant, but it is silently shaping the direction of your entire life. Life is not changed in loud moments alone. It is guided by subtle patterns repeated over time. The morning is where those patterns are either strengthened or corrected. What you do when no one is watching sets the standard for who you become when everyone is watching. Psychologically, the brain looks for consistency between identity and behavior. When you start your day with intention, you reinforce a self-image of control, responsibility, and purpose. That self-image influences every decision that follows. You speak differently, you listen differently, you handle pressure with more balance. Over time, the mind stops asking whether you are capable and starts assuming that you are. This is how inner confidence is built, not through affirmation alone, but through evidence created by daily action. Philosophically, life moves in the direction of its dominant habits. Loud ambition without daily structure is just noise. Quiet consistency, however, becomes power. The morning is where values are translated into behavior. It is where discipline becomes visible, not to the world, but to yourself. And what you repeatedly prove to yourself becomes your truth. Education teaches us that learning is incremental. Psychology teaches us that behavior becomes belief. When you consistently win the first hour of your day, you create momentum that carries forward. One positive action leads to another. Focus leads to clarity. Clarity leads to better choices. Better choices lead to a life that feels aligned rather than forced. The loud moments of life, success, failure, recognition, loss, are all influenced by the quiet ones. When challenges arrive, you don't suddenly become disciplined or focused. You default to what you have practiced. If your mornings are rushed and chaotic, pressure will expose that chaos. But if your mornings are grounded and intentional, pressure will reveal strength. In the end, the morning is not about perfection. It is about direction. You don't need to control the whole day. You only need to control how it begins. Do that consistently, and your days will begin to obey your values. When your days align with your values, your life begins to speak with authority. Quietly, steadily, and unmistakably, you become the person you were preparing for every single morning.